Yes, I have titled my presentation, Building Resilient Road Administrations. And yes, why have I used the term resilient road administrations? And let's go to the dictionary definition of resilient. Resilient means the ability to recover quickly from or deal readily with unexpected difficulty, hardships, or in terms of inanimate things, being able to return to its original shape or position after being bent, twisted, stretched, whatever. And I have used resilient because running a road administration is a difficult one. You will encounter all sorts of difficulties, and there'll always be people who will like to push back to the status quo because the new forms of road administration allow some independence, which is not always countenanced. And this is also buttressed by the fact that roads, especially in developing countries, is very emotive and can be very political. And there will always be people who would want, or where they can, try to set the clock back because then they can take the decisions which will favor them one way or the other. But let us go to the importance of roads. And roads have been built initially as mud brick tracks in Mesopotamia since 4000 BC. Today it's impossible to imagine life without roads that connect goods with markets, employees with jobs, families with each other, and people to recreational centers. Roads are therefore logistical and socio-cultural essentials. This is even more so in the developing world where the other modes of transport have not been fully developed. Roads epitomize freedom. They signify connection and escape. Personally, I've met people who have never been on a plane, a train, or a boat, but I'm yet to meet anybody who has never traveled on a road. Roads also tend to complement the other modes of transport. For example, these days where people are buying, shopping online, the last mile would use a road, one way or the other. The things have to be delivered, and usually, well, drones are coming in, but they still are yet to compete with roads. And in some cases, road transport provides the only means of access to rural communities. In addition to this, roads are some of the biggest assets for developing countries. Sub-Saharan Africa is estimated to have over 2.5 million kilometers of road, of which about 750,000 are main roads. Thus, most developing countries have roads carrying well over 75% of passenger and over 70% of freight traffic. The asset value of these roads are over 200 billion, and is a massive investment. It is important that roads are managed properly for the benefits of the investment in this type of infrastructure to be realized. Roads have traditionally been managed as a civil service department, and some advanced countries still do because there is proper separation of responsibilities and accountability and appreciation of the role of such departments. In developing countries, however, roads were not always managed as a part of the market economy, and roads were always seen as a social service. Road expenditures were from general revenues and the first to be cut whenever there were budget constraints. There were inadequate institutional frameworks for the management of roads. With support from developing partners, sub-Saharan African governments have been reforming the road sector since the early 1980s. Ghana Highway Authority was one of the leads which transformed in 1974, December 1974. But there wasn't a mass movement towards the creation of independent road administrations until the 80s, where with pressure and persuasion from developing countries, most sub-Saharan African countries embarked on that transformation. The main thrust has been the establishment of road authorities to manage roads and the setting up of road funds for adequate funds for maintenance. The new road administrations were to be set up as autonomous bodies to run as accountable commercial entities with appropriate structures and clearly defined responsibilities. Parent ministries were to be responsible for policy and oversight, and there's a balance which says eyes on, hands off. Well, they see what is going on, they can direct, but the day-to-day administration of the roads is a hands off for them. Road funds were to receive earmarked revenues for road maintenance. Initial enthusiasm, probably due to pressure or persuasion from the development partners for road authorities and the setting up road funds, seem to be waning. And where these have been set up, they are gradually being undermined and rendered ineffective. There are a lot of examples across the African continent where there was an initial enthusiasm, they were set up, given all the support, and then gradually either the ministries or whatever are clawing back on their powers and their independence. So there are numerous examples. Please don't ask me to name some of them. So what are the attributes of an effective road administration? An effective road authority capable of meeting the intended objectives of its creation should have, well, a clear definition of responsibilities. This is for clarity in the expectations to be placed on the administration, and for a clear delineation of responsibilities between the ministry and the administration. It is crucial that the functions of the authority are clearly spelled out. And this will help avoid conflict between the ministry and the administration, and also guide the administration in its operations for the achievement of its objectives. Another requirement is that it should have a lean but efficient and effective administrative structure. The structure helps to achieve three things, which are: one, to define all the areas of responsibility within the organization so everyone knows where a given issue should be addressed, minimizing overlap and also duplication. The second is that the structure establishes lines of communication for internal stakeholders, employees to utilize. And three, by establishing the lines of communication, the structure helps in ensuring effective interaction, thus minimizing the time wasted by information moving within the organization. It's amazing what can sometimes happen, that information doesn't flow and therefore work can't be as efficient as expected. It also helps to, that's the third point, it helps to establish the lines of authority. By granting specific levels of authority to persons all along the structure, including making persons accountable to other persons and exercising authority, it provides a system of checks and balances in the organization. The administration should therefore aim at having a structure that minimizes bureaucracy by being lean, so that instructions and information flows very quickly through the system, instead of having a very long or a many-tiered organization where information flow can stop at any point. It should, however, have adequate middle-level supervision, while at the same time ensuring that all the expected function can be effectively dealt with. So even though it should be lean, there should be sections to deal with the expected functions effectively. The organization should also have a legal basis. A legal basis for the existence of the administration through an act of parliament is necessary to provide legitimacy to the organization. And this is very, very important because, you know, there have been attempts in some countries, and actually it happened in Ghana, where a president, I think it was President Leman, and the 31st or New Year address in 1981, threatened to disband the Ghana Highway Authority. But if there was no act of parliament, then this could have been done by a single signature. But when it goes through the parliament, then it means if you want to disband it, you have to go back to parliament. So this is necessary for the survival and the legitimacy of the organization. And it also ensures that the existence of the organization and its provisions are in conformity with the Constitution of the nation. The law, therefore, provides a basis for which its actions can be defended should there need be. It should also have a strong oversight of a broad-based management board. The primary responsibility of the board is to ensure that the authority functions as intended. Their responsibilities include ensuring that, being a public organization, the resources provided for the discharge of its functions are properly managed and utilized as effectively as possible. The board also have the function of selecting, evaluating, and approving appropriate compensation for the chief executive and top management. I hasten to say that this has not been achieved in most of the sub-Saharan African countries, where salaries and remuneration and other perks are determined elsewhere. And the boards only have to implement these. And then the board also gives approvals to the organization's programs prior to these being submitted to the ministry, the Rules Fund Board, and sometimes in some countries to the Ministry of Finance. And the board also approves the financial statements of the organization. The board has the responsibility for ensuring that personnel management in the authority is based on current practices and that the systems used in the organizations are appropriate. Current good practice requires a split in board membership between private and public stakeholders. To make the board as independent as possible, the private sector members of the board should be in the majority, with the chairperson coming from the private sector. And the private sector representatives normally come from identifiable stakeholders or road users. It's important that the chairperson be a respected and knowledgeable person to be able to provide a required direction, and they should be able to help open doors for the organization and make contacts where it's usually difficult for public servants to do. Other members of the board should be knowledgeable and respected individuals among their peers or communities, and they should complement each other. They should have the strengths that they bring to the board so that the organization can be led appropriately. The selection of public sector members is usually made through appointment by their various ministries. A total membership of around 9 would normally be adequate. Private sector, there's times when private sector members may be this is always what happens. Private sector members may be nominated by their groups for consideration by the ministry in charge of roads. And public nomination may also be used, but may not allow representation from a cross-section of users. Sometimes people canvass and get a lot of people to support them, and they get on the board, and usually they have very little to offer. But so where used, it should be limited to the selection of only a few, maybe no more than 2 members. Again, the organization should have a sound technical and financial management systems. Systems used in the conduct of an organization's operations form the backbone of its performance. The systems allow the achievement of consistent performance outcomes and the repeatability of outputs. They allow periodic auditing for changes to be effected for improved performance. The organization would also rely on the technical systems to ensure that its performance is cost-effective and efficient. It's just not systems. The systems help make sure that the organization performs at optimal levels. And then the administration, being a public or institution that would use large sums of taxpayers' resources in its operations, require a robust financial management system that ensures accountability and minimizes fraud. So these are basic ingredients for an effective road administration. While these are necessary and essential, they may not be sufficient to ensure resilience, looking at the performance of a number of road administrations in sub-Saharan Africa. And this should be supported by other robust systems, including a sound legislative environment which has enforceable laws on financial management, or rather mismanagement. I know of a country where this is very serious. After the budget has been drawn and approved by everybody who needs to approve it, the system doesn't allow for changes, and people can go to prison if they change it. And then they also put an onus on especially political heads. If a political head comes in and tries to vary the program, then he has to bring in additional funding. It means the original program cannot be toyed with or be set aside. If you want something else to be done, you have to bring in the additional money. And then a sound public service management. This is also very important. The sound public service management allows the recruitment of competent, merit-based top management who appreciate and understand the principles of road asset management and commercial approach to management. And then the top management should have good communication skills and awareness of the political environment. Where this is absent, then the employment of people to lead the organization can be managed from elsewhere, and discipline in the organization also becomes difficult, which undermines the growth of the organization and its effectiveness. I worked in a country where they had a very sound public service management, which had guidelines on the recruitment of top management and even all staff. It has to be published. There have to be an interview board set up, and you have to go through all these processes before you can be appointed to certain positions in the organizations. This was also good for the people who eventually got appointed, but they had legitimacy, and everybody knew that they had also gone through the system and were probably the most appropriate at the time for the positions. And then also the hiring and firing of other individuals were the responsibility of the chief executive, which meant that there will be no letters from elsewhere saying move this person from this office to this office or this region to the other region. If you needed to do that, you had to convince the chief executive to do that. And it helped to stem interference from outside, which would normally happen. It's not abnormal. People will try to do that. But if you have these laws which are ingrained in the country, then it's very difficult, and it helps the people's management within the organization. And then no organization can run without adequate funds, and also the reliability with the release and timing of the financial inflows. It's important that right from the beginning of the year, the organization knows what they're going to get when they're going to get this, and plan appropriately. There should also be an agreed and transparent processes for programming, including parliamentary vetting. And when Parliament comes in and vests it, and at the end you have your programs, then it becomes very difficult for anybody to change it. I have been in parliaments where parliamentarians have risen up against interference in programs, and they have asked for ministers to be, to be sanctioned, and it can be very serious. And if you have this and you have the parliamentary support for agreed programs, then you can work as independently as possible. And I am not saying it's impossible to have programs changed, but when programs are being changed, there has to be very good reasons agreed by all, and then it comes with the additional funding that is required so that the programs which are given by the organizations can be prosecuted in spite of the additional load that comes in. And these are very important. So that's at the end of my brief presentation, and I'd like to thank you. And if you have any questions, I will try to answer them.